Okay, great. Well, first of all, thanks so much. I mean, it's an honor to be here, and I'm just floored, guys. I mean, I was involved, as Lindsay said, with SV2. Actually, before it was even SV2, we had started the Sobrato Foundation in 1996, and we had a close relationship with the Community Foundation, which had given us a lot of advice in actually starting our foundation. And it was really Peter Hero there who said, when he realized I was kind of embarking on this new venture, I really think you need to sit down with Laura Arriaga. She, has come to us about starting this plan, called I don't even know if it was called SV2 at the time. It wasn't. She had her business plan and she had the concept. And so Laura and I sat down and said, wow, this is, a great thing. And then she took it forward and luckily invited me to join along in the beginning. And it was a very small group, and to see how far the organization has come in what's now been, 13, 14 years. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I just feel so privileged to have been involved throughout, some years more than others, but to see the excitement and the commitment and the impact you guys are having, it's great. So I commend you for your efforts, and again, feel quite honored to be here. And I'll try to, a lot of these questions I think will also just kind of naturally come up as we hopefully have kind of a dialogue more throughout this. I hate being the only person talking. So hopefully, as I say things, or if things come to mind that you would just like to, ask at that moment, please feel free, because I really don't have any real prepared remarks or anything, so I'll just kind of wing it. But I do want to make sure that any, questions you have, and to actually, one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years through SV2 and other organizations like this, the learning that happens from one another within these sorts of environments and meetings, is, I think, often can trump whoever is here kind of talking to you. So I, again, challenge you guys. Many of you have, much, very deep expertise in various areas that I think, I could learn from as well as others in the room. So I encourage everyone to share as we go through this. I guess I'll just start just very briefly giving just the history. When we were starting the foundation, it's interesting, I think, some of the parallels with even the starting of SV2 in terms of just some of the driving factors. Just in terms of, I think, really harnessing passions and seeing kind of untapped potential. And I'm speaking in terms of our actual family, but in a sense, thinking of individuals as partners within SV2, we were family members, each of us quite active in kind of doing our own thing and volunteering with many organizations and privately giving and having, through donor advice funds or whatever, but we didn't have a common platform where we could sit down and really leverage, even our own collective knowledge and expertise, and really a way that we could feel like we were being strategic and making the most impact that we could in our community. So, but it's interesting because when we started the foundation, it wasn't like we had some big bequest that all of a sudden we needed to give away. It was really just kind of sitting around and working it out. So in a certain sense, that's kind of how SV2 came into being. It wasn't like it all of a sudden had this chunk of change that it was going to give away. It was really developed by, with, and for the benefit of the partnership and the community. So when we were forming Sobrato, we just kind of started out by making a commitment saying, okay, we're going to give a certain amount of money away this year, but really had no idea how we were going to do it, what we were going to do, or even where the money was going to come from. We just said we were going to do it. And it was a learning process, but I think that as we came together and really realized the benefit of educating ourselves by surrounding myself with people that had been doing this work and really knew what they were doing. Unfortunately, since SV2 didn't exist at the time, there wasn't this network where I could say, I'm starting out and I want to learn how to do X, Y, Z. So I ordered a bunch of books, which was like pretty lame. I'm reading all this stuff like, okay, how do you form a foundation? Went to some conferences. But it was really those a few people that really took interest in me personally and in our foundation that said, you know what, I've been doing this for a while. I'm going to share, what I've learned. It really kind of took me under their wings, which, with having, the Packard Foundation and other foundations right in the area, I mean, I literally was like knocking on doors and said, hey, we're starting out, can you help me? And it just reinforces the benefit of having a group like this where you can actually join an affinity group and be around like-minded people and, put your funds together around a common interest. And then having educational opportunities that you can kind of sign up for and go to, which didn't really happen for us. But it does, I think, underscore the importance of the relationship building and the value of networks, which we've benefited so much from over the years. When I think of one of the questions I was going to answer, which it's funny, what do I know now that I didn't know when we started out? I mean, I still don't know much, but I really knew nothing then, other than I needed to surround myself with bright people with big hearts that really knew what they were doing, and I still do that today. But I guess that what I didn't know was, and I'm sure as you go through this yourselves, is just how hard it is to be a good strategic philanthropist. I think people have this perception that you're so lucky to do what you do, or you have the, benefit to be doing this, but don't really realize that there's a lot of work that goes with it in terms of being strategic. It's a lot harder than, I think, having kind of come from the for-profit world where you got, a single bottom line. I mean, not only are you supporting nonprofits that have, some multiple bottom lines, you're also trying to do it in a way that is really creating the most impact that you can. And so I guess, and then I'll kind of try to answer some of these other questions, that, one of the biggest lessons I've learned through, and actually I think it's been really by watching SV2 grow, is really that the power of human capital, I think, really far outweighs the power of money. It's and you guys have it, dialed in here in terms of your capacity. Not saying that the philanthropic dollars aren't important, but the value that you add as partners with the way that you've structured the relationships with the grantees, now being on the side of the foundation side where, we're very lean staff, we just can't do what you do. And it's quite limiting, actually, to not be able to, when you say, well, what do you do to really, how could you build maybe the capacity of the nonprofits or work with them on longer relationships? All these things take a lot of time from a funder standpoint. And unless you have staff or volunteers or partners or bodies that really are invested and have the expertise and knowledge to get involved and to give in that way, it's a little limiting in terms of what you can do. So I guess that's just a way in saying that seeing how the partnership has grown and the impact that you've had, it's been, I think, so impactful and great because of the human capital that you've been putting into the different causes that you've been supporting. So I guess, I can shift gears more to some of these questions in terms of our grant making, but I also just don't like talking so much. So I don't know, Lindsay, if you want to chime in or
quickly. Where is the foundation today?
Today,
right?
Okay. Where we started and where we are. So we started with the yellow pages and making phone calls saying, we're a new foundation. Do you guys want money?
And then
Seriously, we had absolutely no structure, no guidelines, no anything. People thought we were crazy,
and
they still do.
How much did you give your first year?
So we actually committed, which is actually kind of crazy when I think about it. We committed to give away $500,000 our first year, so it was $500,000. And granted, we did have a fair amount of requests that had come through. Our family business is in real estate development, so there would be solicitations. Well, and this is actually how the foundation got started. A lot of people would solicit my family to support different causes, and everything would end up in this big folder. And I remember we were actually, someone in our family was ill at the time, and we were at the hospital. My father had this big folder of stuff, and he's throwing everything in the trash. And I'm like, you can't throw this in the trash. You got to respond. You got to respond. So that's where we started. We took all these letters and actually didn't throw them in the trash. We actually responded to these people and said, so that is where we started. No, but I mean, we didn't have professional staff when we started out in '96. I, as a family member, just kind of developed things from the beginning, which I think was pretty important for our family. I think it's hard, especially when you don't know what you're doing, to instantly bring someone in from the outside that will have the trust of the family. I think would have been difficult. So we kind of needed to figure, plus some of the meetings we had were kind of scary in terms of our interactions. So, I don't think we would have wanted to have anybody from the outside listen to some of the stuff. I was in tears half the time because, someone would say something about my personal organization that, they didn't like, and I'd get all upset. But, no, but we hired we professionalized in terms of hiring an executive director, Diane Parnes, who many of you probably know, has been a partner and involved with SVT for many years. She came on board with us in, it was around 2001. So we had a good 5-6 years, if not more, that we kind of fumbled along and realized how much we really needed to have a professional staff person to help take us forward. And she was with us for over 11 years, which was fantastic to have that support. And where we are now, it's interesting because we kind of have gone through these phases in terms of our development. When we first started, a lot of what we did was very much based upon our personal passions. We had program areas that, surprise, surprise, matched what we, collectively were most passionate about, and we did all programmatic support. Then we got involved in, through the Peninsula Community Foundation and the Schwab Foundation, a capacity building initiative that really, it was a cohort of organizations similar to OST, Out of School Time Collaborative, where there was the cohort of organizations, all of whom were working on capacity building issues together, and we participated in that and really learned a lot in terms of what we could be doing differently with our grant making that wasn't so much about our personal passions and much more about what the nonprofits really needed. So we kind of, as a result of that, switched the focus of our grant making to focus exclusively on capacity building and general operating support. Did a lot of asking for feedback from grantees in terms of what they wanted to see us do that would maximize their ability to do what they did better. And it was interesting because one of the questions we asked was, would you rather have an outright grant or would you rather have a matching grant? And it was pretty much unanimous that instead of that, actually they would much rather have us give money with strings attached, such that they'd have to raise new money to actually get our money, because that in fact would help build their fundraising capacity than it was for us to just write them a check. Mm-hmm. So we changed our grant making as a result of that to do 2-for-1 matching grants based upon, and we structured it as new and increased gifts for agencies, such that it really does, and then we asked for the proof after the first year, and we'll continue to fund over time, that we've really seen the benefit, at least as reported from our grantees, in terms of the impact and really the capacity we built from the fundraising side.
So can you talk a little bit about making that switch of doing programmatic funding to the capacity building and matching? How do either your relationship with the nonprofits change, and do you think, if you were to assess doing one versus the other, what are the advantages, disadvantages of one versus the other?
No,
and where would you go forward now having done both?
It's a really good question. It's interesting because while I think we're very well known in the nonprofit community for the general operating support we give, and we know that that's what nonprofits need. Yeah. In terms of the connection of our board members and family members, that passion connection, that engagement, has really waned, has kind of dropped off because I mean, you're doing the right thing, but it's not like, oh, because of us, all these kids got lunches at this particular program, or we got thank you notes for the scholarships that we did, or we, can actually really physically see the results of what we do. And we've always committed to stay very locally focused in Silicon Valley, so that we could, our business is only in Silicon Valley, so we really wanted to give back to the community from which our business has benefited. But it was very easy to go out and physically see the impacts of what we're doing. And it was a lot of the driving and connection for our family. And so after doing this general operating support for a while, it was clear that the board's engagement and interest was going down. So that was about 6-7 years ago when that happened. And so I realized that we needed to do something else. We needed to actually engage folks, but we knew this was a key service to the community, and we weren't going to compromise it in any way. But we hired in a strategic consultant to come work with us to say, okay, well, what is it that would be, do you need to go deeper in answer to the question, do you go broad or do you go deep? And we see our general operating support is very broad in the sense that we support most organizations locally that are doing good things that focus on disadvantaged populations, and it's pretty broad, but very locally focused. But we weren't going deep in the sense where we felt like when we were doing a programmatic grant, we could go much more deep and, hold organizations more accountable. I mean, when we get our outcomes reports now, it's very high level, Did you say, are you doing what you thought you'd do in your strategic plan? It's not that same sort of very kind of tactical and way to show the impact. So when the consultant came in, he and our board was very hesitant to bring someone in to kind of help us figure out what we were going to do. So that was a big step. But, he was able to really ask questions around what we were most passionate about, what we had done and this was like at our, I guess, it was over our 10-year history to kind of really take a look back and say, what have we done, what have we liked, where are our intervention points, but really even more so looking at where the demographic data in Silicon Valley was going and where we could most strategically, as kind of a young, nimble foundation, have maximum impact. So he suggested that we continue kind of doing what we're doing, but if we want to get very engaged in something, to go deep. So we did a fair amount of research and ended up kicking off, and I guess it's technically an operating program, but it's an academic literacy program for English learners called SEAL, Sobrato Early Academic Literacy. And we designed this program. There was a bunch of research out there basically saying that there was no one really focused, and no existing nonprofit that was focusing on our specific area in Silicon Valley that looked at the language needs of preschoolers, so pre-K all the way to third grade, and going through the transition to kindergarten and beyond, because to go into the public schools, they're focusing usually on kindergarten up, or you're doing first 5, and nobody was really kind of doing the whole thing. So we developed this program, and we're in the 3rd year now of a 5-year pilot to track these kids and we're in East San Jose and in Redwood City, and we're at different sites, and we've developed this whole thing. But we still don't have any staff to really oversee a program like this. So it's been kind of interesting. We have an outside consultant that's running it for us, and she's hired facilitators at all our sites to kind of run it. Well, not kind of, she is running it. But it's been interesting now because everybody was so engaged, and this is such the right thing to do, and, we're going to have so much impact, but we were so used to kind of this short-term feedback, we're doing great, that committing to something for 5 years for our family was, it sounded good, and, but after like year 2, literally last year, they're like, okay, we got to move on. I'm like, no, we committed to do this for 5 years, we're still learning. We basically have the first evaluation done. So educating our family around, to really have, impact and to go deep, you do have to stay committed for a long time. You do have to stick to your plan. You do have to deal with difficult, we're in post school, so district dynamics and budget cuts. I mean, and you got to stay the course. You cannot, decide to change midstream. So, but it's a lot harder work to do that, I would say, than doing our general operating support. Yeah. So, we've been learning as part of that. And I'd say we also, we've been learning, another thing we do is these nonprofit centers, which was really a way we could focus on our real estate expertise and being a development company and provide rent-free office space to nonprofits. So we just launched our third one, which is in Redwood Shores, and it's about 120,000 square feet of office space, and where nonprofits can reside rent-free, and there's a competitive process. But again, this was one of those things that sounded great and, tied very closely to what our family was about and really a way that we could add value to the community. But again, from a funder standpoint, without having a lot of capacity internally to manage these centers and to manage, it's a lot harder than just giving money for rent to your general operations to somebody. And, and it's actually a lot more, it's not only that, it's a lot more expensive to actually do it that way. So, but the benefit of having nonprofits co-located and having community conference space and all these other things that our centers provide, but it's educating our family that it's more and more about, meeting the nonprofit need where it is and learning as we go. But we've now, so where are we now? I think I've talked about our programs. We're still doing our general operating support. We're certainly giving away a lot more funds than we did in the past, but our governance structure is relatively the same. It's mostly all family members. We're in the process now of, this past year we've done a growth plan, so this is kind of a phase 2 of when we did this consultant work 5 years ago. We brought in Alexa Colwell, who I think you guys may have met through our education stuff, to really help us work through a growth plan for the foundation to think about the future and kind of how we're going to be most strategic going forward. So we're kind of in our next phase of that and are planning on doing a lot more in the education space that we've overlapped with SB2 around, which is great. But I've realized just how much education is required to be good at what you do, and we finally have had panels at our board meetings where real experts come in and talk about. Our last 2 board meetings were the first time we've actually really brought anyone in from the outside to educate us, and it's been very well received and has grabbed that heart and passion again to actually connect, not that we have to connect, via a grant, but just to have that interaction with the different providers and experts in various areas has been a great way to, I think, re-engage.
These were grantees?
No, so because we're trying to iron out a more formal education strategy and a fund around education, we've had different experts in various areas come in and speak to us. So at our meeting about 3 months ago, we really didn't know where we wanted to play in education. So we had, an in-systems person, we had a charter expert, we had an after-school provider, and I can't remember, but, we had like KIP, reading partner, we had a bunch of people, and they all, but they weren't selling their organizations. It was all about the landscape and, how they could see us being able to make, a great impact. And then just last week we had a parent of an English learner. We had Guadalupe Valdez, who's a professor at Stanford, focused on a lot of issues in education, specifically English language learners. We had Greg Littman from ACE speak, and we had Matt Hammer from PACT, a community organizing group. So we're just, really looking at possibilities. These are not groups that we may or may not fund, in our various cash grant cycles, but to see to really ask hard questions and see where groups like that are coming at things probably from very different perspectives, but how they can align and educate us about what we can do. We felt like we could really benefit from that education. So So we're continuing on. We're, it's really exciting. I think we've had a lot of, like I said in the beginning, learning from other foundations that have been doing this longer than we have has been really, really helpful. And that's really the way that I learned to challenge ourselves to be better.
So Lisa's covered a lot of or touched, I would say.
Did I? I'm going to look at my questions.
Why don't you lob them back in if she's touched on it and you want more, or you have a new question or thought about
broad versus deep. Let's see. I mean, someone had asked about kind of due diligence and grant making. I don't know if I didn't really touch specifically on that, but we have always had a pretty detailed. Anyway, we're probably revamping our process to have it be much more kind of relationship building as opposed to fill out this spreadsheet with all this information and provide us with all this stuff. But it's been interesting as we've kind of revamped how we look at organizations because we've been doing and I'm speaking about our cash grants that focus on general operating support, to really look at organizations from a diligence standpoint. When you're giving general operating support, you don't go into any depth around the program, really. You're going into the leadership, you're going into the governance, and you're going into the financial picture and their strategy, and you're looking at it really as if you were making an investment in a company, whether you're a venture capitalist or, so very high level, but, we ask a lot of questions around those particular areas and have a whole formula by which we rank and rate and all that kind of stuff. Something that's been very important to us has been the face-to-face interactions. So even though we've had very light staff, we have always done in-person visits to most, if not all, of our applicants. All of our applicants, we don't have any regulations around, we're going to fund you for 2 years and then you have to take a break. I mean, the idea is if you continue performing in the ways that our high-performing organization should, that we will continue to fund, and it will be a seamless, long-term relationship. And now that we've got 15, 17 years to look back on, many of our organizations have been with us that entire time. A lot of the key agencies, there's been a few areas that we are focusing less on over the last couple of years, just as there's been more demand on what we do. But fundamentally, most of the folks have been involved for quite some time. As we've gotten bigger, I guess the one change, we've had to put some requirements around the size of organizations that we fund. We used to make grants that were maybe $5,000 or $10,000, and just because of our size and our staff and how much we're giving away, that's just not feasible for us to do anymore. So because the way we decide how much we're going to give to an organization, it doesn't tie to how much they ask us for. We actually have a formula based upon how much money they need to raise from private sources of support each year. And then we'll give a range of anywhere between 4 to 9% of how much they need to raise, which calculates to, ties to, how many points we give in our diligence. But because of that, the small organizations, we now have really a $300,000 kind of threshold where if an organization isn't raising that from the private sector, they're no longer able to apply through our current grants program, which is hard because in terms of a lot of the groups that we personally are involved with, they're smaller. So we're actually in the process of doing probably a bifurcated model that will be able to do some smaller grants that won't involve the level of diligence and the site visits and everything we've been doing for everyone else. Because right now, it's the same process for an organization that may be asking, that will give $200,000 to 10,000, and that's not necessarily how it will be in the future.
So you're saying they have to raise at least $300,000?
$300,000.
It's not budget. So
no, it's not budget. It's private
support.
support. So it does non-government.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we may relook things but at the moment, that's kind of what we can handle, and it's worked out so far. And we do 2-year grants, again, that are all of our grants are these matching grants based on new and increased funds for our cash grants. So we have different mission areas that are, we have basically 2 grant-making decision meetings a year, and they are focused on different mission areas. So that mission will come up every 2 years. So we have, kind of do it over a 2-year cycle, and then we've always got people rolling over into the future. And I think one of the ways we may simplify our process, since we do have so many recurrent grantees, we've kind of had the same process for recurrent versus new potential grantees, which also, just from a diligence standpoint, we can probably streamline a little bit more.
Do you find that there's a number where you would not go after? Like if you had to manage 200 grantees, it would be impossible, right? Or is there a number that you find?
I mean, it's really a capacity issue in terms of staffing. It's interesting because we're very locally focused. I mean, Silicon Valley, as we define it, is Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, but really kind of southern San Mateo County is where we've had developments, and southern Alameda County. We've now been doing new developments through our business in South San Francisco, and anyway, so our whole geography may end up changing, which is going to be interesting. But because we're so locally focused, and we have this threshold, they're just, there's not that many that actually qualify. So, it's pretty even in that we usually have anywhere from 30 to 40 applicants a cycle. But we usually, when someone applies, it's very often that we don't fund them. If they qualify and they meet our mission and we have a threshold, in terms of our diligence. If they score below, it's a 30 in terms of these various categories, then we won't fund them. But most organizations that are kind of that size and caliber and have been around for a while usually do qualify. And then we may need to, depending on what our budget is, we'll prorate, because it's all general operating support based on their size. We may need to pro rata adjust down everybody based on our budget, but most people that we spend the time to vet, we do fund. So,
do you have a situation where you feel like an organization is really worthwhile and has huge promise if only it could scale up, and so you approach others beyond your own foundation to try to create a syndicate to support them, and if you do that, how do you do that? How do you make the appeal, and how do you find kind of the message that speaks to others around you?
No, that's a very good question and a very good point. We have not been the one to kind of spearhead that sort of effort. I'd say we've had the benefit of being the follower with OST and these others, just because,
The Sagrada Foundation just joined the OST Collaborative. So I'm going to say that in Lisa's introduction, but that is an exciting example.
What collaborative?
Our out-of-school time collaborative. So Santel and Packard and SC2 initially, and now in year 2, the Sagrada Foundation has joined that as well.
So I wish I could say we've been the spearhead. We have like 4 staff, so it's hard for us to be doing that. One thing that we have done, at one point, we actually, and I can't remember, it might have even been with a different foundation. It's been a while. When there was a lot of merger opportunity for different nonprofits, and because we saw, everyone was coming to us, we were in a unique position to say, have you had conversations with or collaborated with? And we actually created a fund where organizations could come to us to actually get some seed funding to talk about potential merger opportunities together. So that was, a way in which we at least got agencies to talk together. But in terms of us going to other funders to kind of spearhead an idea, this SEAL initiative that I was talking about, we are planning on, it's just a pilot program. We're not planning on operating this long term, and we're in discussions to spin it off. The whole idea with that was that it would become a program that someone would hopefully take over and then other funders would get involved with. So that by design was that way, but we haven't, we're still too early in it to kind of be out there. So I wish I could say that we've done that, but we really haven't. And there's so much value in, there used to be more like a Silicon Valley funders circle type thing. Did that happen at one point, where and around different areas of interest? So funders at least could sit around the same table and hear what each other were doing and even see, and perhaps say, oh gosh, I'm really, invested in this, and does this match with what you're doing? And I'm not sure if that was sponsored through Community Foundation or, it's been a while, but, and there's many in San Francisco that happen that way, but we, unfortunately, I wish there was more ways, formal ways to kind of collaborate with other funders, but.
Oh, what were your categories of diligence? You talked about the high-level categories.
Oh, okay. So we have, you mean in terms of so leadership is one, which we look at both the staff leadership, executive director, and the board. Finance, and it's on like a 60-point scale, so I think leadership was 10 points. We do look at the programmatic aspects and have, certain questions around that, which I can't remember how that one's weighted. Leadership, financial, program, there's 6.
Earlier you said strategy.
Oh, yeah, looking at the long-term plan, thank you, strategy. So if Diane were here, she'd be able to answer this question.
I remember you guys having we looked one year when we were refining our application, and you had the categories from Forces for Good. I don't know if that's...
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh, and we got feedback. Yes, I think we actually suggest that applicants read Forces for Good. It is tied to that. Thank you. See, you know more about our foundation than I do. If you go online, I'm sure you could
That's all I know.
No, it's true. It's interesting because that was something... I forget, this is again, a small nonprofit was implying and said something about reading, I don't think we forced people to read the book to apply, but if you had read it and could take some of the principles and actually submit your application around those same themes, it was going to be, I think looked at in a more favorable light. But I remember this one person saying, I was up all night reading the book and trying to get it. But then he said, it was the most life transformative experience. Now we've changed our entire operations because of it. So that's funny that you
just for quick context.
You remember
Forces for Good was a study that the authors did where they looked at high impact nonprofits, and they had a set of metrics. It was kind of based on good to great, so they had a filter, right? And then they came up with 6 common practices that all of these organizations had around, do they collaborate, are they involved in advocacy, what kind of leadership, tenure, and other things. So, assuming that's a set of criteria, then it's interesting to apply it in that context.
But they were raising the
Okay.
I had a question about partnerships. It seems like I'm relatively new to this whole nonprofit philanthropic world, and from a high level, sometimes it seems like a lot of the organizations do similar things, but I know that from a nuanced standpoint, they're probably not. But how do you see third party, I guess, how do you see nonprofits working together with partnerships, and is that a culture that they instill, or are they still learning that process?
Well, it's interesting because if I look even in the history of how we've been doing things before, we would basically take applications on grant applications on a rolling cycle. So we weren't really able to compare apples to apples in terms of real mission of an organization. But under Diane's leadership, when we kind of revamped our processes, it made much more sense to, all of the, youth development agents. I mean, they were always considered in the same cycle, but as part of our process now, we specifically ask about competitors that they know, we call it competitors, but do they even know who's doing the same thing? Because we do, but, something, and if they can't answer that question, that actually tells you something, how much they know about what's going on, and we specifically ask, have you collaborated with, and if not, why, and if so, how, and we see what the different overlaps are, and just in terms of our diligence process, now I'm going like this because it's this huge spreadsheet, but it actually, if they're like organizations in our cycle, and we've got all these different categories, I mean, it's very easy now to be able to compare and to look at, even, for instance, Boys and Girls Clubs, the one of Silicon Valley is very different than Peninsula, it's very, different than Peninsula, is it Mid-Peninsula? Anyways, just in terms of the amount, they serve, their overall budgets, and even, the strengths and weaknesses are very different. But when you can look at and justify, well, for one, we may be giving a certain amount, and the other, we may be giving 2 or 3 times that amount because of these various factors. But because we now compare it in that way, it's also very clear if, and we also do it by location, if there's organizations that are pretty close to one another, and it sounds like they're kind of doing the same thing, but haven't even, know that the other is doing the same thing. We begin that dialogue, definitely as part of our diligence process and part of our site visit to get more information around that. But again, as a funder, it's really hard to, and while we can make suggestions or at least connections, to from the outside say, well, so-and-so down the street's really doing what you're doing. The organization, it's usually because you need to be very place-based and you have to be within walking distance for your clientele to find you. It's not because, and yes, maybe you can have some administrative efficiencies by having your administrative office for a larger organization in one site and have programmatic things in various different avenues. But I guess we've learned as funders that we don't know more usually than the nonprofits do. There's usually a reason why they're doing what they're doing. But I'd say that our success rate, just in terms of the administrative inefficiencies of having a lot of small organizations, that was one of our real policy decisions to really only fund those organizations that have kind of a critical need of over $300,000 in private support, because at that point they usually, from an administrative efficiency level, have gotten to that point and have either acquired the other agencies that they should have or have been competing with. But it's really the smaller ones that often don't know who their neighbor is and what they're doing, at least from our standpoint.
Kelly and Claire.
So I'm really intrigued by your early reading program.
Oh,
Right. And you're sort of a little bit more than halfway through it, and I wonder when you finish the 5 years and get all the metrics and results, what are your thoughts about what you do at that point, and have you thought about sort of any public-private partnership models to scale that if the results come out?
We're right in the middle of it. No, we're actually in discussions as we speak with different public agencies or public, that specialize in work such as this, that, whether we continue, we know the pilot needs to, we want to maintain the integrity of the pilot under our leadership, but that doesn't necessarily mean we need to run the entire thing. We can manage it through someone else. The whole sustainability piece, because we're in public school districts, has been challenging. Even, you don't want to come in and say, we've got this great program and we'll pay for it and we'll give you people and we'll provide all this stuff, and then after your 5 years, it's like, okay, see you, bye, that was nice. You've got to have this buy-in from the beginning. So we've worked really hard with the districts we're in and with their superintendents to get commitment. But it manifests itself in different ways in terms of, even getting the teacher time off to do the trainings that we require. Well, maybe they're not putting hard dollars for that particular piece. It's a big deal to get, we require, I don't know how many hours a month, for them to actually make that sort of commitment's a big deal. But we're learning as we go, our preschoolers, so we have pre-K, they finish kindergarten, they're just starting first grade, but we're now designing and about to, get things together for when they enter second grade next year. But it becomes much, it's a different discussion with the districts now in terms of once they start doing STAR testing and different things, there's not a lot of flexibility in funding like there is when they're younger, and it's going to be a harder discussion, and we may need to think about how we structure. I know we're going to think about how we structure the next 2 years, but the thing about a pilot, we may need to course correct and decide what, where our biggest impact is and how we market and replicate it. Right now we're seeking to actually do, whether you call it a business plan, replication model, marketing, whatever. That's our biggest need right now. We've just gotten our second year of evaluation data, and it's remarkable. We have no concerns that this works. It's just, well, how do you make it sustainable within the public school system? And and it may, part of it is we really wanted to do it here because this is where our where our focus has been as a foundation. But if the environment is not such that we can find districts that will really take it on and do it long term, at least we want to have this all packaged up so we can educate other states about it or whomever might want to take it. So we're beginning that, but again, it's a little early. But if you want to be on our task force, we'd love to. We have a national advisory group that's been helping us because we've never done something like this, and we're definitely learning as we go. And learning that we don't have the capacity to be doing something like this. So I think outsourcing and partnering is the only way it's going to continue on to be successful. So, yes.
So, with regard to this program and your ongoing philanthropy in this space of early childhood education, what do you think of the new California state initiative that's going to be implemented very soon of providing state-funded programs for young fives?
For younger. So that is an area that we're hoping to tap into, and we're working, especially in San Jose, because it's the perfect thing for what we're doing, and it to capture those kids, and it's something that is mandated, but nobody has any plans as to how they're really. I shouldn't say this. I'm totally overgeneralizing, but from what we have seen, if you can hand, a complete package of this is how you do it, and we'll even fund it to a certain extent, but especially for these kids that have already been part of our program who now will have an additional year, we're
Is it clear the state's going to pay for this?
no. And they say they will, but a lot of stuff they say they're going to pay for and they never do. So I guess I'm not even hoping that there would. It would be great if they were able to actually say.
Mandated by law, right?
Mandated by law, but I guess it's just for those kids that have those birthdays between September and December.
Yeah.
That they basically will just so they'll have a per day whatever. Whatever they'll be paid for their education, but nobody's developed what that would look like in terms of curriculum.
So I wonder if the Sobrato Foundation might not
Be
call
the-
Jerry Brown and say, hey, we're here.
We're here.
Very experienced in this space.
Mhm.
Maybe we can create some kind of a statewide task force to implement something to help you pay for this, help you implement this.
And if we have that much money. What do you say? Yeah, no, I would say we're taking it to that level. We're certainly working with the districts, that we're currently in and talking with
And Sand Hill, too. It's like such a perfect.
the mayors and stuff. It's definitely, and I think because we have this, the folks that are on our national advisory board are definitely, I think, figureheads in this area as well, and they're trying to help us, design it and figure out what next steps are. But going statewide, we're so locally focused. I don't think we need to.
Come talk to us at the school event. I'm also on the board of Stanford.
Oh, okay.
Come talk to us.
Okay. No,
We can create something out of this.
Hey, I'm all for it. No, there's definitely a huge, need and potential
You
that.
and Dean interested in these kinds of things.
Excellent.
Talk to us.
Good. Any other? Did you get your question answered?
Yes, so I wonder, many nonprofits complain that they never hear from the foundations about why they were not funded.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you give feedback to the nonprofits you don't fund and how honest that feedback is. Because I think sometimes, they just need to hear you need a new grant writer.
Yeah.
The grant was impossible to read. There's nothing wrong with the mission. It's just that it was impossible to read.
Yeah. No, it's funny because we used to, when I look over our history, we used to not fund most of the organizations that came to us. It was maybe 50-50. So a lot of those calls that I would personally make were to organizations, many of whom I was on the board of or had very close relationships with, to say, what it was that was the problem with their, and why they weren't competitive. And you can't just say, well, you weren't as competitive as everyone else. You need to give some specifics. So we usually have been pretty direct in terms of, and now that we have this whole kind of matrix, we can say, well, you scored really well, on this, that, and whatever, but your plan was a mess. And, I wouldn't say it in those words, but it would be a little more politically correct. But as I said, because of the way we do it now and the organizations that we've been supporting are usually those, and we've been very specific about, in terms of folks that can apply, we have this whole kind of pre-eligibility questionnaire they fill out online. And each nonprofit, when they get their tax exempt status, registers under a primary mission code, which it's this national taxonomy of agencies or something. But anyway, so you have your main code, and so we now only support certain codes that we know are the ones that, if they're a strong organization, but it's taken us a long time to figure out, well, if everything else is equal, we're actually much more likely to fund, this particular mission than that. And so that's, we've taken things off the table that we wouldn't otherwise fund. So we don't have to communicate. I mean, we just had a board meeting last week, and there were, usually they don't get through the process very far. It's usually, we're very clear that, 50% of the beneficiaries you serve have to be in our geographic area of focus. And since we focus exclusively, on general operating support, you may be a, Bay Area organization and have a very strong program in Silicon Valley, but a lot of what you do is in San Francisco. And before, because we did programmatic support, we would support them, and now we don't, because most of what they do is outside of our area, which isn't, it doesn't make people happy, but at least it's clear. So they just don't even make it into our cycle anymore, as opposed to them doing all the work and then us say, well, actually, you don't have enough, and we do the same and calibrate based on how many disadvantaged we say disadvantaged, but disenfranchised, because you may have a program that focuses exclusively on, children of high need, but then have maybe, a program in a Palo Alto school or something, so we really focus on those organizations where their primary mission is focused on a disadvantaged population. So, but it's taken us, 17 years to keep refining and refining. So, but now we've got this big process, so then people are like, oh, we can't even get in the door because we got all this process, but if you get in the door, then you're usually funded. So but I feel as we revamp things a little bit going forward, that being able to be more responsive and have the dialogue when things don't fit neatly into our process is really important. We did, for the first time, the Center for Effective Philanthropy can do a grantee perception report survey for you for the small price of, I don't know how much. But anyways, they did ours.
Small price of a lot.
But it was really, we always, would get feedback from our grantees as part of our process. It's not always the most objective feedback that you then receive, because you either gave them money or didn't give them money or whatever. You don't want to affect, even if it's anonymous, people don't really tell you what's up. Mm-hmm. Plus, you can't really aggregate the data in a way that then compares it to a peer group. And so what the Center for Effective Philanthropy will do is they'll take a like organization that's maybe our size, but is in a different state or something, and be able to say, well, on all these different areas, you should target, there's other groups out there that are getting a 75% ranking and you're at 40. How can you get yourself better? So you're not just looking at what people, that you're close to are saying about you. And it was really eye-opening. We received very high marks on a lot of things, but we had a few open-ended questions around, what we could really be doing better, and took away from the survey, again, this whole relationship building and being open to have dialogue, which takes time. So you make a choice. You either have staff that can, or volunteers or interns or someone that can respond and actually have that conversation, or you err on the side of, efficiency and process so that people don't even get in the door so you can run it with two people. So, so we've chosen the efficiency process angle to date, but are thinking about whether or not that's the right strategy going forward. And the other important feedback we received was how much more we could be doing, and this ties to, I guess, one of the questions and comments around, really getting nonprofits together to collaborate, that we, as could be much more of a convener to get nonprofits together, especially since we've got these 3 centers. We could have programming, we could have a whole nonprofit sector initiative, and our board talked about that last week, and we're thinking about how we're going to design that going forward as well. So I think many agencies feel very kind of siloed and don't have a way to learn from and share with and network with other agencies, and to the extent that we can help make that happen.
That's interesting that you said that, because Nancy or somebody else asked about the collaboration point. And being an ED of a nonprofit, I can tell you, the biggest obstacle is time. People that run nonprofits are just so busy trying to run excellent programs. We don't have time to go others. So now I'm in this collaborative with the SV2 and Sandhills part of it, the OST, that forces me to make the time for it.
You have to.
And it's great. I mean, we're just learning so much and from each other. So hearing that you're thinking of doing that, I think that would be very beneficial.
Well, we're hoping to get agencies to help us in the design as well, which I...
Did you ever go to the Funders Fair, the Peninsula Funders Fair?
Yes.
So Peninsula Community Foundation.
Remember,
years
way
ago,
back when.
in the olden days, we used to do the funders, this thing called the Funders Fair every year, which was basically for the nonprofits to come, and we had
They'd line up and
panels of tons of local funders, and
they
it was an incredibly popular event, for needless to say, but really valuable. And it's interesting to me how there's a real gap right now. I mean, I feel that we really, as funders, there's no forum really in this community where we all come together and we say open season.
Just come in.
Ask us any questions you want.
That's a real, I think embedding
materials, our promotional, our guidelines, or whatever, It was so easy, honestly, to do it. Really,
it was a long day, but it was.
Well, I mean, it was like
no, it's good. No, but
that's something that the OST could look just at that space, just at least from funders in that space.
So
that's another
a really
idea.
exciting note on which I want to spend time and formally wrap up so the folks can leave and say a proper goodbye and not feel like you have to quietly sneak out the door. But Lisa, this is incredible. I mean, I think so much learning and just chances to think and talk and ideas, big and small. The OST Collaborative came out of like our third First Friday lunch that we ever had, and I have no doubt that great things, whether it's SEAL and ELL or you want to call Jerry.
Above all, thank you for your generosity.
Well,
that's true. So thank you for everything that you have done for SV2 and for the community, and for being here with us today. And thank all of you for everything you do and for taking the time. And definitely stay visit with one another. Like Lisa said, that can be one of the really fun parts of all of this. And Lisa's here if you have more one-on-one questions.